My sister slapped me across the face in the middle of a jewelry store. She called me a toy soldier like my years of service meant nothing. All because I was buying an engagement gift for the man I love. The sting on my cheek burned, but the sting in my heart cut deeper. Then a retired Army colonel stepped forward, his voice like steel. Touch her again, and see what happens. My sister froze, her face pale, and for the first time in my life, she backed away. I'm Juniper Quill, and this is my story. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments? Or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reach. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story resonates with you, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your support means more than you know. It helps me keep telling the truth, even when it hurts. When the plane wheels hit the runway at Asheville Regional, I felt my chest tighten like the air had been sucked out of me. 5 days. That was all the Army had granted me after months of sweat sand and the constant hum of war machines in Iraq. 5 days to breathe, to ground myself, to maybe find some version of home. My phone buzzed in my hand as we taxied to the gate. A message from my father. 4 words. Take a taxi home. That was it. No welcome back. No offer to pick me up. No question if I'd made it through another deployment in one piece. Just a dismissal typed out like I was some delivery he couldn't be bothered to sign for. I slid the phone into my pocket, staring out at the green ridges that cupped this city like protective hands. Asheville looked the same from the window seat, lush, serene, deceptive. But inside me, something knotted tight. I had built this tiny ember of hope on the flight home that maybe this time would be different. Maybe after all these years, my family would look at me and actually see me. That ember flickered out with a single text. The cab dropped me in front of the old Victorian house in Montford, its porch draped in ivy, the windows glowing with late summer light. I hauled my bag up the steps, knowing what waited inside. Not warmth, not joy. Just the same invisible wall I'd been running into my entire life. In my duffel bag, hidden between uniforms and sand-dusted boots, was a small, empty box. It wasn't for me. It was for the bracelet I planned to buy Theo Carver, the man who'd seen me at my strongest and my weakest, the one person who didn't treat my uniform like a costume. He was still overseas, and I wanted to surprise him, to etch our bond in something solid. But I couldn't breathe a word of it here. I knew exactly what kind of smirks and snide comments I'd get. I opened the door, the familiar scent of lemon polish and wilted flowers wrapping around me. My mother's voice floated from the living room before I could even set down my bag. Does Sienna know you're here? Not hello. Not we missed you. Just a reminder that my existence was secondary to my sister's. And then she appeared as if conjured, Sienna Brooks. My older sister, my lifelong rival, my shadow and my wound. She swept into the room like she was stepping onto a stage, hair-curled dress, tailored, the faint shimmer of success clinging to her like perfume. Well, if it isn't our warrior woman, she said, her smile sharp as glass. Done playing war games yet? Her laugh echoed, polished and cruel. Standing there with the sting of travel in my bones and her mockery in my ears, I knew this leave wouldn't be a rest. It would be another battle. Not fought with rifles or bridges under fire, but with words, silence, and all the years of favoritism carved into the walls of this house. 5 days of walking the same minefield I thought I'd escaped years ago. By nightfall, I was seated at the dining table, staring down cornbread and barbecue pork that smelled like home, but tasted like ash. The table looked like something out of a postcard, lace runner, mason jars of sweet tea, the hum of cicadas filtering through the open windows. But beneath the surface, the air was thick with unspoken hierarchies. I tried. I really did. Between bites of cornbread, I told them about the bridge my unit had built under fire in Iraq, how we managed to connect two severed routes despite rockets screaming overhead. For a moment, my voice carried, and I felt like maybe, just maybe, they were listening. But Sienna swooped in, like always, her words sparkling. That reminds me of the fundraiser concert I organized last month. Over 300 people attended. We raised $15,000 for the Arts Council. Instantly, the room shifted toward her, the spotlight stolen my story, swallowed. Mother leaned across the table, her eyes narrowing at my posture. Juniper, you'd look so much prettier if you wore dresses more often. Maybe something with color. You don't have to act like a man just because you work with them. The cutlery in my hand trembled, but I forced a smile. Then my father, barely looking up from his plate, asked, "You're still in the army?" His tone was flat, as if my entire career was a temporary hobby, something he'd assumed I'd outgrow. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took another bite, my tongue heavy with silence. Around me, laughter bubbled. Sienna's anecdotes about celebrity clients, Mother's praise of Willow, her perfect 8-year-old granddaughter. I sat there like a stranger, listening to the cadence of a family that had never found space for me. Memories crashed in school plays where my seat was empty, soccer games where Dad forgot to cheer, nights when I cried into a pillow because Sienna's name was always spoken first. Joining the army had been my rebellion, my escape hatch. Yet even here at this table, I was the outsider again. My phone buzzed in my lap, a lifeline. I glanced down and saw an email from Captain Nora Hensley, an old colleague. Her words glowed. "Your leadership during the bridge project saved lives. You should be proud." For a moment, warmth bloomed in my chest. Someone saw me. Someone knew. Later, while gathering dishes, I paused in the hallway as Sienna's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Don't worry, she'll be gone in a few days. She always is. Juniper comes and goes like she was never here at all." Her laugh was brittle, cruel, and certain. I stood frozen, the plates heavy in my hands, my ears ringing with the truth. I had always known in this house I was a ghost. And in that moment, I realized my presence here wasn't a reunion. It was a reminder. No matter what I achieved out there in the world, within these walls, I was invisible. And invisibility has a way of cutting deeper than any slap. I left the house before anyone woke up, fully slipping out with my keys, and a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Asheville greeted me the way it always had when I needed saving: sunlight, glossing over brick alleys, the smell of espresso, and rain-wet stone buskers tuning guitars under murals that looked like they were painted straight onto the sky. I wandered without a plan, letting the city decide for me. Battery Park Book Exchange was already open, lamps glowing warm against stacks of old hardbacks. The clink of champagne flutes at 10 in the morning, because in this place people celebrated small reasons and didn't care who judged. I drifted through aisles of first editions and creased paperbacks, fingers trailing spines, thinking about bridges that hold, even when they shouldn't, and families that don't. Outside, a fiddler leaned into a melody that made the street feel like a porch. A chalk artist knelt on the pavement, drawing swirls of blue that looked like the French Broad itself. People moved with that easy downtown rhythm, tourists with cameras, couples with dogs, the usual chorus of hellos between baristas and regulars. It was the opposite of my parents' house, where every word had to be measured and every breath felt like asking permission. Here, I could be one more face in the flow, not the constant disappointment at the end of the table. I cut through a side street to a cafe with windows thrown open to the breeze. The line moved slow. Espresso hissed. I took my coffee to the window bar and watched the square wake up. The empty box in my bag felt heavier than its size allowed. I was ready for something that belonged to me, to us. A small thing forged from metal and meaning that didn't ask permission from my mother's opinions or my sister's spotlight. Raven's Gem Gallery sat tucked between a pottery studio and a place that sold hand-dyed scarves, its front window scattered with stones that caught the morning light and threw it back in new colors. A bell chimed when I stepped inside. Glass cases gleamed with rings and cufflinks, and pieces made by hands you could almost imagine hammer marks left like fingerprints. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked up from a bench scattered with tiny tools. "Morning," she said, a Carolina lilt soft in her voice. "I'm Clara. Take your time." I told her I was looking for a bracelet. Something simple. Something that would last. She brought out trays without fuss, letting me hold the weight of each piece in my palm. When I picked up the Titan band, I knew. It was plain, clean, honest, strong without announcing itself. I said I wanted it engraved. "What would you like it to say?" she asked, reaching for a pen. "Steadfast together." The words landed like a promise I could make and keep. She smiled, then tilted her head. "You could add coordinates. Where you met." The suggestion opened a door to memory I hadn't planned on walking through, but there it was anyway. The dust, the roar of generators, paper maps held down with mugs. The two of us hunched over a table in a canvas tent, arguing about a route while a coffee that could strip paint steamed between us. Theo had laughed when I made a face, said, "It's terrible, but it's ours." And I'd remembered thinking, there you are. I gave Clara the base location and the day. She sketched the numbers with care, then looked up. "We can have it ready by late afternoon." "You in town long 5 days?" I said, which felt like both a sentence and a reprieve. As she wrote the order, a flicker crossed her face. Not judgment, more like a small warning. Her eyes slid toward the window as if pulled. I followed the glance. Outside, a shape I know better than my own walked past the glass, perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect timing. Sienna flanked by 2 women carrying tote bags and the scent of curated attention. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was a big city on a small scale. People run into each other. I told myself I was allowed to buy a bracelet in daylight without asking my sister's permission. My phone buzzed against my thigh. A message from Theo lit the screen. "I have bad news. We'll tell you later." The words blurred for a second, the way vision does when you drive from bright sunlight into a tunnel. I stared at them until the edges of the room came back into view. I slid the phone away like it had burned me. Clara boxed a paper claim ticket and handed it over. "We'll take good care of it," she said, voice steady in a way that helped me steady mine. I thanked her and stepped into the street, the wind lifting the edge of my jacket, the city still doing its morning dance around me. I walked without aim again, letting the sidewalks decide, but no matter how far I went, the message in my pocket chimed in time with my pulse, and the ghost of Sienna's silhouette followed me like a shadow that refused to detach. By late afternoon, I circled back. The sky stretched high and clear. I rehearsed 100 things I might say if I ran into her, neutral, polite nothing to feed. I told myself not to borrow trouble. I told myself I had earned this small joy, a band of metal with words that felt truer than anything spoken at my parents' table. I pushed open the gallery door, thinking only of the weight of the bracelet in my hand and the relief of having something finished. The bell rang and the air felt cooler inside, metal and polish, and the faint sweetness of jasmine from a pot on the sill. Clara looked up and smiled like an anchor thrown just where I needed it. She reached for a small black box on the counter, but before she could place it in my palm, the door opened behind me and brought in a gust of perfume and performance. "There she is," Sienna said, like she'd discovered a rare bird. Beside her stood a woman with a press badge clipped to her tote, and another holding a phone already raised and recording. The influencer's lips were glossed to a mirror. The journalist had that sharp, alert look that says she smells a headline. Sienna's gaze dropped to the box, then rose to my face with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Buying jewelry," she said. "For who, yourself? Or is this another one of your noble sacrifices, gifting things to men who aren't real?" I kept my voice level. "It's for someone who earned it. To mark something that matters." She tilted her head, faux pity painted on. How sweet. Our little soldier playing house. You know Asheville loves a story. War girl comes home and pretends she's engaged. I can see the comments now. The room went narrow. I heard the soft whir of the phone camera, the quiet intake of breath from a couple browsing wedding bands, the small tap of Clara's pen against the glass as if asking the moment to behave. I didn't move. Years of training teach you this. The first reaction is rarely the right one. I don't need your approval, I said. And I'm not your story. Sienna stepped closer, the heel of her shoe clicking like a metronome. You're only interesting when I'm in the frame, she said. Without me, you're just background noise in a uniform. Her hand moved before I believed it would. A clean arc then, the flat of her palm cracked against my cheek, with a sound that silenced the room. Heat flared bright and instant. I tasted copper and shock. Someone gasped. The influencer's camera jumped, then steadied as if her hands knew how to hold even when her mind didn't. For a heartbeat, the world emptied out. My body wanted to move. Everything in me trained to assess and respond. I did the opposite. I rooted to the floor. I let the red bloom and recede. I looked at my sister, the way you look at a storm you've been warning people about forever. Clara stepped out from behind the counter, voice firm. Ma'am, you need to stop. But Sienna was already doubling down, eyes bright with the thrill of an audience. Fraud, she said low enough that only I would hear it. You dress up in camo and think it makes you someone. You're nothing without the costume. Before I could answer, a man who'd been studying a tray of cufflinks turned. He was tall, posture straight in a way that never leaves you once it's been drilled in gray haircut, close of face weathered into kindness and steel. He set the cufflinks down and stepped between us, as if he'd been stationed there for that purpose alone. That is an officer of the United States Army, he said, voice calm and iron. You lay a hand on her again, and you will answer for it. Do you understand me? The room had that charged stillness right after lightning strikes. The journalist's eyebrows climbed as she recognized him. People shifted, creating a space around us without moving their feet. Sienna's chin lifted, but the color drained from her face. Who are you? She said, trying for board and landing on brittle. Colonel Roland Vance, retired, he said, eyes never leaving hers. And a citizen who knows assault when he sees it. Silence reassembled itself in fragile layers. Somewhere behind me, the bell on the door tinkled again as a couple slipped out whispering. I could feel the outline of the handprint cooling on my cheek. The awful awareness that something private had just been turned inside out under glass. The influencer lowered her phone half an inch, then raised it again. The journalist cleared her throat. We're live. She told Sienna softly, that gentle, predatory tone of someone promising a softer angle if you play nice. It hit me then, the woman with the press badge wasn't just there by accident. She was part of Sienna's entourage. And the red light on the phone screen meant the moment had already left the room without us. I turned to Clara. May I have the bracelet, I asked? My voice sounded like it belonged to the kind of person I keep trying to be, measured, steady, unwilling to hand my narrative away. She nodded and placed the black box in my hand like a single stone laid true. I opened it. The Titan band lay on a bed of dark velvet, the engraving catching light. Steadfast together. Beneath the coordinates, small and exact, as if they were an address back to myself. Sienna shifted as if realizing the performance had slipped beyond her control. You can't hide behind strangers forever, she said. You can't hide behind rules. I'm not hiding, I said. I'm done absorbing what you throw. I closed the box and slipped it into my pocket. You don't get to decide what matters to me. The colonel inclined his head toward Clara. You may want to call the police, he said, not looking away from my sister. At minimum, file an incident report. These things have a way of repeating until there are consequences. Sienna scoffed, but took a step back. The journalist's lens followed her. The influencer mouthed a quiet wow to no one. I could feel the city beyond the door indifferent and alive. I could feel the video already writing itself in captions and clips, strangers choosing sides based on a slap and a uniform, and a woman who would not swing back. I thanked Clara, nodded to the colonel, and walked past my sister without brushing her sleeve. The bell rang again, the street air warm on my face. My cheek still burned. My hand found the box in my pocket. Above the downtown noise, a single thought rose clear and undeniable: this would not stay in the four walls of a gallery. And maybe it shouldn't. When I walked back through the front door that night, the air inside the house felt different, stretched taut, like a wire pulled too tight. My cheek still carried the faint heat of Sienna's hand, though the sting had dulled into something heavier. Upstairs, the walls hummed with silence, but my phone would not stop buzzing. Notifications stacked one after the other: TikTok, Twitter, links to military blogs I'd never even heard of. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, scrolling in disbelief as the video replayed over and over. Sienna's palm connecting with my face. My stillness. The voice of Colonel Vance cutting through with iron authority. Thousands of strangers had already shared their verdict. I was commended for standing my ground without striking back, while Sienna's arrogance was dragged into the open like laundry left too long in the rain. But recognition came at a cost. I hadn't even closed the door to my room when my mother stormed in, her lips pressed thin with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done to your sister?" she hissed. "Sienna could lose everything: her reputation, her career. Do you know how hard she's worked to build that?" I stared at her, stunned at the ease with which she placed the blame on me. My father followed, slower but colder, his hands shoved in his pockets. "You embarrass this family," he said flatly. "You never know when to let things go. Always making a scene." I rose to my feet, shaking with something too sharp to contain. I stood there and did nothing. I said, my voice rough but steady. I didn't raise a hand. I didn't even raise my voice. All I did was absorb it like I have my entire life. For a moment, silence stretched between us, my words echoing in the stillness. Then my father cut it clean in half with his verdict. "You've never known how to keep peace, Juniper. Always stirring, always fracturing." The words landed heavier than the slap ever could. The ringing of my phone interrupted the standoff. I answered in the hallway, grateful for the distraction. It was Colonel Vance. His tone was measured, the kind of authority that carries both weight and calm. He said he'd witnessed enough to testify if I wanted to pursue charges. I thanked him, but declined. I wasn't interested in dragging it through the courts. "You did something many soldiers can't," he said quietly before hanging up. "You chose dignity over retaliation. That takes more strength than most will ever know." His words steadied me in a way my family never could. I thought the night had given me all it had, but as I checked my email before bed, one message stopped me cold. It was from the Army's Office of Public Affairs, an official invitation to speak at a leadership seminar in Washington, D.C. They wanted me to share my perspective on restraint, on composure, under pressure, on leadership in the face of public scrutiny. Reading those lines, I felt something shift. This was not just a temporary firestorm. This could change the course of my career. Yet as excitement rose in me, so did a shadow. If the slap had shaken Sienna's control, my invitation to DC would ignite a fire in her jealousy she would not contain. The next afternoon, I agreed to meet Sienna at Dobra Tea. The cafe glowed with lanterns and rugs, incense curling through the air, the kind of place that made people speak softer. But nothing about the air between us was soft. She sat already, waiting, posture perfect, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, but her smile rehearsed. "I overreacted," she said, stirring her tea with delicate precision. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Juniper. Everyone expects me to be perfect. I lost control for one moment. I envy you, you know. You don't have to carry that weight." I looked at her across the candlelit table, the hum of conversation muffled around us. You don't envy me, I said evenly. You resent me, and I'm done excusing it. Her eyes flinched, but she pressed on, voice sharp. We're sisters. We can't let this ruin us. I leaned forward, my hands flat against the wood. We're not sisters. We're two people who grew up in the same house. That's all. Before she could respond, a vibration rippled through the cafe. People's phones lit up at once, screens flashing the same headline from the Asheville Citizen-Times. I didn't need to read the words. I saw them reflected in her face. Accusations of embezzling funds from her charity gala. Numbers missing. Contracts breached. Her smile cracked, her hand frozen around the teacup. Around us, whispers sprouted like weeds. Her reputation, always polished to perfection, was unraveling thread by thread in public. By the time I returned home, my parents were waiting, desperation in their eyes. You have to help your sister, my mother pleaded. This family needs to stand together. If you testify for her character, if you spin this, I cut her off before she could finish. She has to answer for her own choices. She created this, not me. My father's silence spoke louder than any plea. The house seemed smaller, darker walls sagging with denial. Later, upstairs in the room that had never really felt mine, I opened a drawer looking for paper to jot notes about my upcoming trip to DC. Instead, I found a photograph our family lined up in front of this very house years ago. My mother, my father, Sienna, smiling bright, and me, half hidden at the edge. My face was marked with a faint smudge, pencil strokes that had once tried to erase me. My throat closed. The truth was not new. It was only more visible now. The exclusion had not started with the slap or the silence at the dinner table. It had been written into my childhood like fine print no one acknowledged. As I folded clothes into my bag preparing for the Capitol, my mother knocked lightly on the door. She stepped in with eyes red but voice composed. I shouldn't have let things get this far. I should have protected you more. But we need peace, Juniper. We need to hold this family together. Her apology hung in the air, empty as the shells of cicadas clinging to trees outside. I looked at her and felt the final thread snap. I don't need an apology, I said. I need you to see me. Not the shadow behind Sienna. Me. She swallowed hard, but no answer came. I zipped my bag and turned away. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of detachment not as a wound, but as release. Whatever I was walking toward in DC, it would be mine alone, not a borrowed identity or a second place behind my sister. The house that had never felt like home finally loosened its grip. And in the silence that followed, I felt something I hadn't in years, freedom edged with purpose. The Pentagon's auditorium hummed with a gravity I could feel in my bones. Rows of uniforms, rows of suits, a sea of expectation staring back at me as I walked across the polished stage. Lights caught on brass insignias and the faces of journalists poised with pens and cameras. My palms were dry, my stride steady. I had faced mortars and sandstorms, but this moment carried a different weight. It wasn't about survival. It was about truth. I looked down at my notes, then set them aside. My voice carried out clear, each word chosen with the precision of a blueprint. I told them about the jewelry store, about the hand that struck me across the face, and the decision I made to stay rooted. I described the stillness, the humiliation, the temptation to swing back. And then I told them why I didn't. I stood there not because I was afraid, I said, my gaze sweeping across the hall. I stood still because I knew I didn't need to fight to prove my worth. My value is not measured by retaliation. My strength is not diminished by restraint. The silence afterward was absolute, thick and ringing in my ears. Then, like a tide-breaking applause, thundered. It rolled from the front row of decorated generals to the back, where cadets sat wide-eyed. I felt the sound move through me, a reminder that dignity could be louder than violence. Later, backstage, an officer pressed a folder into my hands. "Congratulations, Major Quill," he said. "Your promotion is effective immediately. You've also been selected for advanced leadership training at Fort Bragg." My breath caught, not in disbelief, but in recognition that the path I'd been carving in sand had finally hardened into something permanent. As I stepped outside, my phone vibrated. A message from a friend back in Asheville. "Your sister was just taken in by the police. Embezzlement investigation. It's everywhere." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening with something between sorrow and inevitability. Sienna's world was collapsing in real time. On the ride through Washington's glowing streets, my mother's number lit up. I answered, the hum of traffic filling the silence until her voice broke through, fragile and cracked. "Juniper," she said, "you have to help your sister. You're the only hope left for this family. Please." I watched the city lights streak by, reflections sliding across the window like ghostly hands. For the first time, I realized I didn't belong to the Quill family the way they had always claimed. I belonged to myself, and that was enough. Back in Asheville, the mountains looked both closer and further than ever, their blue ridges hazed by late summer sun. I sat on a bench at Pack Square Park watching children chase pigeons while street musicians played for loose bills and guitar cases. Life pulsed in easy rhythms around me, so different from the chaos I'd left behind. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like stillness. Sienna found me there. Her heels no longer sharp, her clothes no longer perfect. Her eyes shadowed with defeat. She stopped a few feet away, arms folded like she was holding herself together. "I've lost everything," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "The contracts, the board, the friends. Gone." I studied her, the sister who had always stood taller, brighter, louder. Now she looked small. "I'm not here to fix you." I said, my words firm. "I'm here to live my life. That's all." That evening, I walked to the Montfort house one last time. My mother waited on the porch, her face softened by guilt, but still marked by the same old pleas. "I'm sorry," she said, wringing her hands. "I should have done more, but we need peace, Juniper. We have to keep the family together." I pulled a faded photograph from my bag, the one I'd found marked by an eraser that once tried to remove me. I placed it in her hands. "I don't need peace. I need you to see me. Not the shadow of Sienna. Me." Her lips parted, but no words came. I turned and left before she could find them. The next day, I returned to Raven's Gem Gallery. Clara greeted me with the same steady kindness, and this time I bought something not for Theo but for myself, a pair of silver earrings, handmade and simple. I slipped them on, feeling their weight settle like armor, like a crown. They weren't a gift. They were a declaration. That night, I called Theo from my temporary apartment. The screen lit with his smile, dusty and tired but familiar. I held up the bracelet. "For you," I said. He grinned, teasing. "Guess I'll have to re-enlist just to wear it right." We laughed, and then we spoke of the future. No rush to marry, no rush to bind our lives faster than we needed, but a promise to stand together. Steadfast, as the engraving said. On my last night in Asheville, I stood before the mirror, silver earrings catching the lamplight. The reflection staring back was no longer the girl who sat invisible at her family's table. She was a woman who had carried bridges across rivers, carried dignity through humiliation, carried herself out of shadows. I stepped outside onto the porch, lifting my eyes to the dark sweep of the Blue Ridge. The breeze touched my face, cool and light, carrying away years of weight. Victory, I realized, was never about breaking my sister or forcing my parents to see me. It was about release, about stepping free from the bonds that tried to keep me small, about living my life on my own terms, not theirs. The night stretched open wide and forgiving, and for the first time in years I felt it welcome me home.